Hey there, Jamie.
Hey, Jeff.
How are you?
Wonderful.
It's so great to be in Breckenridge with our family.
Yep, it's enjoyable.
That's one of the things that we look forward to every single year. And we look forward to talking to you, our fellow streakers. How are you on this fantastic July? Almost over.
Is that amazing that July is almost over?
I can hardly believe it.
Time. It's going fast.
In July, we've been back to the basics, and we've been talking about anything that relates to any of the three laws and really getting back to the streaking basics in regards to setting up your streaks, making them laughably simple, creating a community around them, and law number 2 is keep a record. If there's no record, there's no streak. One of the things that has been really exciting that I've talked about in many of the podcasts and will continue to talk about is we've got the new app that's out and up and coming, and we're testing it right now. So the app that is currently available is a great app. We're going to do a fantastic upgrade, which will allow all kinds of community interaction. And that's really where our topic comes from today.
It is. And we're excited because from the beginning, I think the community has been an aspect of the app that we've wanted to really be central, but it's taken us till now to kind of get to the place where we could really do what some of the ideas that we've wanted to do from the beginning.
Yes. So what have we done? Well, basically, you are able to post on any streak what you felt while you were doing that streak. What are some of the things that you learned or are experiencing, or maybe even any questions that you have?
Which has been, so we don't have a lot of people testing it yet, just a handful of us. But already it has been so fun to see the different ways that the community works. So like you said, being able to post, like we've had one post where she said, I write one sentence in my journal a day, and today was one of the worst days ever, and I felt like writing my sentence in my journal was like a stick it to the universe day. Like I'm going to stick it to the universe by writing my one sentence. I loved that post.
Oh, I loved it too. That was absolutely phenomenal. Sorry, go ahead.
And then we've had several posts where people will post what they've learned from something they're doing because of one of their streaks. So they share something that they've learned that's tied to one of the streaks that they have. And that's been super fun too.
It has been something that has just liberated me in being able to post and make you, and we talked about on the last podcast how I'm not necessarily a social media poster, but when we do the streaking app, I really enjoy doing that. So the question came through, or actually the statement came through, I deliberately broke my streak. And this was the start of the post. In case you hadn't noticed, you'll see that there's a great big 0 at my streak, because when you post, it shows right at the top of the post what the streak is that you're posting about and how many days, weeks, or months you've kept that streak alive. And so the user, the streaker, said, I deliberately broke this because it was too hard. And the streak was basically they needed to read 2 articles weekly. And when she set it up, it sounds laughably simple.
Right, especially in a week.
Right.
You're like, I can do that.
I could do that. And so that's oftentimes what will happen is what we think is laughably simple comes along, you start doing it, and then life hits you in the face. And when life hits you in the face, you recognize whether or not that streak is laughably simple. And she basically said it wasn't laughably simple, so I purposely ended that streak. Now, when I read this post, I thought to myself, you know what? There's other options than just purposely ending the streak. I think purposely ending the streak is one.
There's one option.
And I want to talk about that for just a second, because to have the consciousness to be able to say, you know what? No, this streak is not working for me in the way that I thought it would. It's too hard. It's not delivering for me what I thought it would deliver. Therefore, I'm going to end it. I think that's good.
I do too. I think, and totally acceptable. In fact, I think that's part of the beauty of having streaks is it helps you to delineate the things that you look at and think, okay, I really do want this in my life. And then there's sometimes you set a streak around it and you get going and you're like, you know what? Actually, I guess I've decided that's not as important to me as I thought it was. And I think that's a valuable insight that streaking brings.
Yeah, both are equally as valuable because they're conscious and you're making the conscious choice. So, because I've had some criticisms out there that streaking makes you have more of an obsessive compulsive type behavior. When in actuality, I mean, sure, anything brought to an extreme can be detrimental. Same with streaking, same with anything else. However, the real tenor and tone of streaking is really about being conscious about who you are and then setting the streaks necessary to be that person. So when she said, I ended this streak, she was saying, you know what, it was too hard. It wasn't something that I felt I could keep going, and it wasn't going to add the value. It was too much overhead in order to add the value. Now, let's go a little bit different route. Let's say that she, rather than ending the streak, what I say is simplified the streak. So if you think about simplifying the streak, what does that mean? Well, if she had read 2 talks weekly or these 2 articles weekly, then and she said, that's way too much. I recognize that's way too much. Well, then you can actually keep the streak alive and simplify it by saying, you know what, I'm going to read only 1 talk this week or 1 article this week. And if I read that 1 article this week, then I can keep the streak alive. Why? Because you've been reading 1, you're just now simplifying it. Does that make sense? In other words, so if I've been doing it for 30 weeks in a row, and now I switch to 31 weeks, I'm just restating the streak as read at least 1 talk in a row, or read at least 1 article. And if I've been doing 2, I can now count 31 because I've done at least 1, but I can no longer count the 2. Does that make sense? Is that too complicated?
No, I actually have a personal experience where I've done that very thing that you're talking about. So I started with a streak to listen to 1 TED Talk every week. And I was able to do it for a little while, but then I reached a point that I had broken that streak. I hadn't listened to a TED Talk. And so I reset the streak again, and I made it 2 weeks, and then I broke it again. And so then I rethought the streak. And, actually, I think I set it again, and I made it 2 weeks. And then the next week I was going to break it. And I thought exactly what you said. I'm like, okay, I really do want to have this be a streak that I keep up. But is there a way I can simplify it? And I was trying to think, because the streak was only listen to 1 TED Talk in a week. And I was thinking, how can I make that simpler? And what I ended up doing was saying, okay, I don't have to listen to a TED Talk. I just have to pick one that I would want to listen to. Because if I don't have time, I can surely just pick one. And the 2 weeks that I've been doing it, I've obviously picked one to listen to. So I'm able to keep it alive without having to start it over. And then I wanted to talk a little bit about, so it's been interesting because I've had that streak now for, actually, I think like 8 weeks now. And I just
So it's a relatively new one.
It's still a relatively new one because like I said, I had to start it over twice. And in that 8 weeks, I have had 3 weeks, maybe even the last 4 weeks in a row, that I did not listen to a TED Talk. I just went through, I browsed and looked at one and thought, oh, I want to listen to that one. And so I have a list of TED Talks that I want to listen to, but I had gone 4 weeks at least without actually listening to one.
Right.
And then just this last week, I actually listened to one. And I was thinking to myself, I was evaluating what this streak is doing for me. If I was able to go 4 weeks without listening to a TED Talk at all, just picking one. So literally the laughably simple part of it. I was like, okay, so why am I having this streak if I can still go 4 weeks and have not listened to a TED Talk? I mean, just now in the 5th week, I finally listened to one again, even though now my streak is 8 weeks old. And I was thinking about it, and I thought, the interesting thing is that the last 4 weeks have been pretty crazy in our life.
To say the least.
To say the least. And I think sometimes what we do is we always compare to the highest. So, if I had been keeping this, I would have listened to a TED Talk every week. And that's what I wanted to be doing, but it was too hard. But what I realized this last week is that because I've still kept that streak to pick a TED Talk every week I've looked at the TED Talk website or app, and I've looked through the different talks that are out there, and I've picked one that I think is going to be interesting. And then this last week, I actually listened to one that was really fun and interesting. I don't believe that I would have listened to that one if I hadn't had the streak to have to pick out one every week.
Yeah.
So even though I wasn't listening to one every week, it was still keeping it in a place that when I was able to come back and be able to actually listen to them again, which is what I would like to be doing, I was able to pick that back up. Whereas I think there's so many things going on in life, especially now when I'm moving and having to put the kids in schools and different things that I'm having to think and start. I don't think I would be thinking, oh yeah, I should start listening to TED Talks like I wanted to be doing 5 weeks ago.
Right.
Does that make
Yeah, that makes total sense. It's the whole concept of the flywheel that Jim Collins talks about, that to keep it going is much easier than to start it going. And no matter what, if you were to let it go completely, eventually that flywheel would come to a stop, and it is much harder to start it again. That's what I look. So that's why I go back to with our streaker that was looking at it and saying, okay, reading these 2 articles weekly is too much, rather than completely stopping it and trying to start it over. Instead, simplify it and say, okay, I'm going to read 1 article a week. And maybe that's even too hard, and I want to simplify it even more. And therefore, I go to, I'm going to read at least 1 paragraph in an article weekly.
Or even I'm going to choose an article to read weekly. Because what it does is it keeps you're still opening the app or looking through the place that you're choosing those articles from every week, which still is keeping it a part of, you're still thinking about it. Maybe not a lot, but you're still thinking about it. And then when you are ready to add that energy back to it, you've been thinking about it and you can just jump right back into where you were.
Yeah. When you do that too, when you jump right back into where you were and you keep the energy going on it, you are at least having that floor. We've talked about the floor before, on which you can stand to do, like what you said, listen to the TED Talk and have it there and available. And you've built up this reservoir of availability for the TED Talks, for the articles. And now you can draw from that reservoir when you have just a little bit more time. So in that regard, when you start looking at your streaks and you consider what they are, you may at the very first think, you know what, this is laughably simple. But then when you get into the whirlwind of life and you have that awful day where your son comes in the middle of the night and says, I'm going to throw up, and they miss the toilet altogether. In fact, they hit the bathroom floor and it splatters all over everything.
That's a little graphic.
but true. But true. It just happened to us. Then you know that when those moments happen, you can keep your flywheel of who you want to be moving, because the simplicity of what it is that you're doing is the simplicity of what it is you've been doing is there and available and keeps you going forward. So, we talk about the first law of streaking, which is keep it laughably simple. And I look at that and say, all of us, think that we understand and know what laughably simple is. But in actuality, I don't think until we start going through what it is we do on a day-to-day basis that we know and understand really what laughably simple is. And so, and that leads me to the question of, okay, so if she now simplifies these, right? She gets them, she's down to, you know what? I think what I can do, what's laughably simple for me, is to read at least 1 paragraph in an article weekly, or maybe it's even the simple part of, nope, it is actually just looking at, I'm going to choose at least 1 of these articles to read. I may or may not read it, but I've chosen at least 1 of these to read. The question that I have, we've talked about keeping the flywheel going, but the question I have is, what do you do to stave off that whole feeling that this really doesn't make a difference? I'm really not progressing. I'm really not moving forward. And I don't know the answer to that right away. I'm kind of asking a question that's out there. And usually when I ask a question, I'm asking it of myself as well. But do you have any thoughts right up front?
I have a few thoughts. So, because I feel like I come to this question a lot, especially with the streaks that are around. So like my streak to do an act of kindness every day is a streak that sometimes I look at and I think, if I'm sitting in bed at the end of the day and I look through my day and I'm just thinking, oh, that can count as an act of kindness. But I don't know that I was thinking that when I did it. A lot of times I've thought, well, does that count then? Should I count it? And the interesting thing that I keep wanting to really reiterate, but is a difficult thing to communicate. So I hope I do this okay. Is that what you're doing when you set a streak around some of these things is you're literally changing the way that you think. And that takes time, sometimes a lot of time. And that, so I look at it, I had an experience yesterday, and this is why I brought up my do an act of kindness streak. And so we're up here, and one of the things that they do in Breckenridge that's really cool is they have a lot of ability to be able to recycle. So they put different trash cans in the room so that you can recycle. And this year I committed that I was going to be better at recycling. And so they have the blue bin where you can put all the recyclables, and then they have the white bin, which is irregular trash. And then they have this other bin that's just for glass. And I spent the time to kind of read and figure out what all the bins were and the color codes so that I could understand.
And this is monumental because most of the time we don't pay attention to it.
Right.
I mean, and we've been coming up here, this is, I think, our 6th year.
But this year I was like, you know what? If they've got all this stuff here, it's not that hard. I'm gonna recycle. So we had it all separated out, and the recycle bucket was full. And so I went with my son. I'm like, we need to go empty this. So we go to, and what I thought was going to be is that there would be a chute where I could just throw all the recyclables down the chute. And when I got to the trash place, it wasn't a chute like it is where you put your trash. It was just a bigger bucket like what I've been putting my recyclables in. And they were very clear that they wanted very specific things in the recycling bin. And I had added additional things in my recycling bin that they didn't want in theirs. And so I sat there for a minute and was like, maybe I'll just throw all this in the trash and not do it. And then I thought, and this is the thought that came into my head, could my sorting out my trash into the recyclables be my act of kindness for the day? Like, could that count? And I thought, and I'm like, yeah, I think it can count. And so I spent the time to sort out all of the things that qualified for the recycling, and all of the things that didn't, I put in the trash. But the purpose of this whole conversation is not just to encourage you to recycle. But the purpose was, I've had that streak for well over a year, and it is changing the way that I think, that I'm starting to look at things differently, that it takes away the annoyance out of a certain situation that I was trying to do better, and I still hadn't done it exactly the way I wanted. I was able to just tweak that a little bit and think, you know what? It's an act of kindness to take a few more minutes to do this, and I'm going to do that. And I don't think I would have done that without the streak. I think I shared a similar experience a couple podcasts ago about picking up a piece of trash. They're super simple things, but what's really happening is that I'm changing the way that I'm thinking. And that was something that I thought about earlier in the day, not at the end of the day, but it's taken a lot of days to start to think that way. And that's what I guess I'm saying with a laughably simple streak, is that there's a lot of patience involved when you're doing something laughably simple every day with the point of trying to change the way that you think. There's so many things vying for our attention, and so many obligations, and so many things that we need to be doing, that to try and change something simply and think about it every day can be pretty monumental. And that's where I feel like a streak, as something as simple as do an act of kindness, has broadened my vision to be like, okay, there's a lot of ways that I can show kindness, and I'm starting to notice that. And I don't think I would have noticed those things. I think I would have given up on it without a streak.
What would have been a bother and a burden became actually something that was meaningful to you and your life and who you wanted to be.
Right. And it gave me the chance to slow down and appreciate the thing that I did do. And it also gave me the chance to recognize that these things take time, that changing in this way takes time. And that's okay, to be patient with just each day doing a little bit. And over time, those little bits do start to add up. And what do they add up to? Sometimes they add up to things that you've done. Mm-hmm. But more importantly, what I feel like they add up to is changes in how I'm able to behave, how I'm able to act, how I'm able to feel, how I'm able to approach the world around me. Am I able to approach it with more kindness? Am I able to approach it with more patience? Am I able to react in different ways because every day I'm just trying a little bit to pay attention to this one little thing? Even though there's been a lot of days that I've had to question and say, does that even count? Is it even really making a difference?
I love that. It makes me smile because as I think about what you're saying, And then what our streaker said as far as these 2 articles, the things that we're looking that she wanted to read on a weekly basis, rather than giving it up completely, simplify it. Make it, and I need to do a little bit more study, but an irreducible complex. And there's something about that I need to study a little bit more. I brought it up because it kept on coming to my mind. There's also something in software programming called minimum viable product, which basically means that you're going to get in a week period of time or a 2-week period of time, there is a working piece of software that you're going to get out the door, minimum viable product. It has to do with Scrum and continuous improvement. When I started to look at and consider simplifying, one of the acronyms that comes up is KISS. And that acronym has many different meanings behind it, but the one that I like most is keep it small and simple. And when you keep it small and simple, the keep is the critical word there. Keeping it at the most basic level keeps you having success. And that success, that self-credibility is critical to continuing to build your confidence in what it is that you can do and who you can become. That's what I've noticed. You had 2 great stories to illustrate that. There's been several experiences that I've had as well that have illustrated the whole idea behind keeping it simple and simplifying it if it's too hard, because it can be in line with who it is I want to be. That's what I love about it. So if you have a streak out there that you're having a hard time to keep, but it is in line with who you want to be, rather than ending it, take a look at how you might simplify it and continue it going. And the whole principle, we wrote about it a little bit in the book as far as being able to, if, for example, a mile a day is too hard, and so you switch to a half mile, you get to keep the streak because you've been doing at least a half mile in pursuit of your mile. So 300, if you have a 375-day streak of at least a mile and you figure that's too much, then you know what? Simplify it. Take it down and keep the streak alive. Wouldn't you say?
Totally.
So if you have any other thoughts or you'd like to add the conversation, please email me, Jeffery, at streakingmastery.com, or
Jamie at jami@streakingmastery.com, or follow us on Pinterest, Instagram. Where else are we?
Pinterest,
Instagram,
LinkedIn,
LinkedIn,
and our own Streaking Mastery website. Also, download the app now. It's fantastic. Start tracking your streaks and get ready for a fantastic upgrade in December. It's really going to be phenomenal. And friend us on the app. You can do that in the app and make a community right now. Anyway, we hope that you have a wonderful rest of July. Until we talk again,
keep streaking.
It's the small and simple things that make you grow into what you're hoping. You're in a hurry.